It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh. I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday. Hope everything's going well. Moving through, getting into the spring, warming up. You know, it does seem that everybody has a better attitude when the sun comes out. It is weird how most people, well, not most people, almost all people will say something like the sun improves their attitude or whatever. And I always thought that was a stupid. I really didn't think that made any difference, but over the years, I've started to notice it really does. I mean, maybe I'm weird. I guess it doesn't matter to me where I'm at. I feel the way I feel, but even in my own family, they do have a better mood when the sun's out. So it's nice to be back in the spring. I always feel sorry for the folks up in the Northeast. I know it's hard for them because they go through such a long time frame where it's just cloudy. My brother lived up in Cleveland for a few years, and I remember we used to fly into Cleveland, and when we'd fly into Cleveland, you get there like in October, and it's really the last time it's kind of sunny, because then after that, every time you fly into Cleveland, you get right before you're right about to land, you go through a whole thick load of clouds, and then bam, you hit the runway, and it stays like that until somewhere around March or April. So I guess if you're from the Northeast, you're probably used to the fact that there's not that much sun around, and the spring is something that's a welcome. So
it's just depression.
What's that?
It's just depression that covers that city.
Well, in all seriousness, that's a problem. And a lot of folks in the Washington area will make that statement.
That's the weather. It's actual depression, though, in Cleveland.
Yes. To my Cleveland friends, I have to admit, I spent some time in Cleveland, and I joke with y'all a lot, but whoa, it is a rough, that is probably one of the rougher cities to come into. But we love the folks out there. They're great people. It's just, it's a different type of city, that's for sure. So maybe, but we are good to be back in the spring. We just went through a horrible cold spell. We didn't have any really the entire winter, and then we just had to get one pop on the side of the face that was just a terrible one. So that's just recent, but now we're back into the 70s. Probably will stay that way. Maybe one more cold spout, but now we move into the thunderstorm era, where we have to have thunderstorms, which by this weekend I think we're under thunderstorm warning again. So we go from winter freeze warnings to hardcore thunderstorm warnings, which is typical for the state of Texas. Welcome to Texas if it's your first time in.
Let's just get all our insurance claims over at once.
Well, the insurance claims you got, they're already. That's a good point to make, and I'm wondering if we really should do a show in the next week or so, on hail, because one thing I just thought of that you reminded me of. We're going in from where the insurance adjusters are really stuck right now because of all the winter issues. And it's only going to take one hailstorm to make that a pretty bad problem for them. And I'm curious the resources, how they're going to be able to do that. So that's actually something I hadn't thought about yet. So that's kind of interesting in itself. This week, I didn't have a chance to look anything this week that's out there that was major news for any of y'all, real estate wise. I'm trying to remember if anything caught my eye.
Homes continuing to get an obscene amount of offers. Other than that, nothing else.
Rates went up a little bit.
Offers continue.
Slightly, yeah.
Low inventory, so there's nothing changing there. In fact, that's not going to change. I'm convinced we roll through the summer and maybe into the end of the year the way the market is right now. And just like we preach in our group, and to a lot of other people out there, the key right now is getting listings. You need to be focusing your time. If you're a real estate agent, and we have a lot of followers that watch the show, especially the new agents, we don't mind telling you the same things that we share inside of our group, that you better be looking for listings, because even if you have a lot of buyers, it's not going to do any good right now. Now, it might do good for the future once everything lines up, but we don't know when that's going to be. And we really need to start getting the sellers out there. So look, for the general public, and this is a great, now a lot of our agents, the value to the show, the people who watch the show, they take the show and they send it to their clients to convince them that it's not just them telling them something. Well, this is a good example. You really should be telling anybody out there that is kind of on the fence about selling their house. If you're on the fence about selling your house, you should sell your house. Make no mistake about it. You should sell it. Now, you're like we've been saying, you're not going to move into another one. You might be renting another one, or you might be in an apartment, but it's going to be hard for you to buy one. And if you can accept that, and maybe even go for a year or two, it might be a very good investment. We're talking about some people making 100 to 200K on their houses right now because of the timing. So it's something you want to consider. And for the agents out there, when you're talking to someone, that's really what you need to be telling them. You need to be telling them, hey, look, I'm not telling you to sell it. I'm just saying, if you want to, you should get that out there. And this is the chance that you have to do. And we're pretty sure that it's going to sell super quick. So that's another good thing.
I'm selling my house next year.
Hey, I don't know if you should do this year, Mike. Seriously, with you.
Well, we got to renovate the other one first.
That one's got to be worth the maximum amount right now. I mean,
this one's good. This one's good. The other one's good too, but we're going to sell this one.
Think about what we paid for that a long time ago, and we
now stole this house 13 years ago.
I love it. Hey, y'all! Before I go any further, it's a little bit different today, and it kind of just, even for the start of it, it makes me wish I'd do it more often. But I brought more of the crew on today. Me and Brent usually handle the show. I actually feel like I'm bothering the guys when I ask them to come on. They're so gracious. Well, Brent doesn't have a choice, so he has to. People like Mike and Banu and Richard, they have a choice. But it's nice to have them on, and we probably should do it more often because the show really does center around them and what we do from the core perspective at the SWR group. So actually, I will introduce them today. I normally don't, but I am going to let them introduce themselves today because we haven't done it in a while. We don't care about Brent because everybody knows who Brent is. We'll start with my buddy over there, Mike Ellis. Most people like Mike know Mike too, but go, Mike, tell them where you are, what you do, where you at, how many years you've been doing, all that good stuff, man.
I'm a real estate agent.
Yes, I'm surprised too.
I do real estate.
Yeah. Where do you like to be, Mike?
I'm up in Denton, but I'll go just about anywhere. But I do like to concentrate on the areas that I'm in. So, Denton, Frisco, northern areas like Valley View and Sanger, places like that.
Yeah, I love it. I wish everybody answered like that because that's the truth. I mean, we specialize in areas, but we'll just go anywhere. Mike's also a longtime friend. I give him a lot of crap, but he's a longtime family friend of ours. So always good to have him. Banu, tell him who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Hey everyone, it's good to be on the show, Robert. I, of course, as Michael said, real estate agent, and I basically work in Frisco, Flower Mound, Louisville. But as he said, I've been driving to Prosper, Wiley, all over Dallas, Fort Worth, and it's expanding at such a fast rate that before we know, I think we'll be in, Gainesville, I suppose.
No.
But
No, I'm the only one that'll go everywhere. Y'all have to specialize.
Oklahoma, Crum. It's just.
I don't think people realize that we're really only 30 to 35 minutes from the Oklahoma border, and that is where it's going. And it's not just there. We're going south too. We're going into Midlothian, south of Midlothian. The DeSoto folks are starting to catch on. So I love the fact that we are finally acknowledging that we probably do need to expect that a lot of our future is going to be in those areas. So Banu, love to have. Banu really does specialize in the Fire Mound area, but she goes anywhere. I mean, she's great, and there's not enough time to talk about how awesome she is. For her clients that watch, you guys are so lucky to have her. It's so hard to find somebody that has her knowledge and that cares. A lot of people either have the knowledge or they either care too much and they don't have both, and she has both. So
I have neither.
Thank you.
So great to have her on and continue her real estate career as she continues to grow. So love having her. She's also part of our family too. Richa, how are you today?
Doing really well. I also, like the other three folks on here, do real estate. It's crazy how it worked out. So I work, basically I follow the path up and down the tollway. So Prosper down to Highland Park. So on either side of the tollway, usually that's where I work. But Plano, Frisco, University Park, Highland Park, all of those areas are usually where you'll find me stomping around.
Yeah, and I'll throw a push out for Richa too. For her friends that watch, everybody knows Richa, and she handles the things that the way she wants her schedule to go, and she utilizes her real estate career that way. But I tell you, for a general realtor, and especially a luxury realtor, she's very strong. And notice how she mentioned some of the luxury areas in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Going back to what we talked about a minute ago, and those of you who are on the fence right now, especially in those types of homes, I mean, you should talk to her and see if you can, how much that thing's worth. Because, when we're talking about a house being worth 50 to 100K more than it normally is, we're talking about the average home. We're not talking about, luxury. Luxury might even be higher. We've seen some luxury go 200, 300K over where it should. And one of the cool things about luxury is the fact that those people, it doesn't matter what the appraisal, which by the way, we're going to talk about that today, doesn't matter to them what that is. And they'll pay the extra amount because they have the funds to do it. So from a luxury standpoint,
and then usually in luxury, there isn't nearly as much turnover in the homes as there is on the more moderately priced homes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When families are purchasing homes about 500, 600, 700K and up, usually they're planning on staying in there a little bit longer than maybe folks that are more moderately priced. But either way, yes, appraisals matter, pricing matters, and luxury homes, you're right, are going for significantly more than they used to previously.
Yeah, another thing that also, this is for you too, Richa, another thing that probably should be discussed more at that level of homes is the process of home switching. Whether, a lot of those people may want even a bigger place than they already have, but they don't want to gamble on having to find it or whatever. They might be able to get to where someone is in the same position and there's a domino effect where they're switching houses. And that's something that should be discussed too. A lot of our clients should be asking us, hey, do you know of someone who does that, wants to do that? And us reaching out and saying, hey, look, we've got this person. Would you consider it? That's another angle that a lot of agents are missing right now. They're just doing the regular marketing to pick up the listing, but they're really forgetting that they should be looking at innovative ways to pick that stuff up. So, and as always, like I said, I do have my buddy Brent over there. Brent doesn't need an introduction. He's a smart guy. Everybody knows it. And he helps me with day-to-day operations of SWR. Quite honestly, I can't do it without him. He, too, is part of the family as well.
I also do real estate. And I specialize in easy deals. So if there's no drama and I get paid a lot of money, that's where I'm at.
He finally has become a real estate agent, so he does too.
So he takes all the cheap deals, and Richard doesn't get out of bed for less than $500,000.
That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good.
If I had the ability to turn bright red, I would be very bright red right now.
That's a pretty good analysis. I will.
And it's 750, Mike.
I will.
At 750, yeah.
Brent, because I give him so much crap, but I also praise him a ton too. And he has never had more houses under contract than he has right now in his entire career. And that's almost incredible. And Brent, I will tell you, I'm pretty sure I've never had that many under contract in a month. Pretty sure that I've never had it that many. So that is just
So happy hour on Brent. That's what you're telling us?
Damn right. Damn right. Happy hour on Brent. Even more than that.
Yep.
I can't tell you. That's just doesn't happen very often. I've done pretty well in it, and that just doesn't happen. I mean, I don't like saying the number. That's not anybody's business. Just rest assured, it's a lot, and that's hard to do. Hard to do. Okay, we are going to talk about appraisals today. We're continuing our conversation about appraisals. We had a good introduction to the process last week, and as always, our shows the topics can go on forever. There's never just one thing that we can do, but we laid it out, and we had a lot of people that were, already asking us, since we hinted that we were going to do it, that they wanted the real piece of it as to what happens. So we talked about the theoretical side, but today we're going to talk about what it is you do, which probably is the more valuable show between the two as to what it is that you do. All right, before we do that, I want to make sure we get our sponsors out of the way, because once we get into it, we are going to roll, especially with 5 people on here. We are going to roll today. So we have some great sponsors out there. We love them dearly for all the stuff they do. and the amount of business that they do with us. So want to let Brent pass those on really quick, and then we're going to jump into this and get appraisals going.
I think I need to start reading like the Micro Machines guy because we're getting so many sponsors.
Well, you probably should.
I probably should. All right. So in 2018, there were 120,000 realtors in Texas. 2 years later, in 2020, well, now it's 2021, there are now 140. That's 10,000 new realtors each year in Texas. Almost every realtor George DiGianni has met doesn't know their customer-centric value proposition and distinct competencies that set them apart from hundreds of thousands of realtors in Texas. George is the only mortgage lender who helps realtors excel beyond their current level of success by incorporating his academic knowledge from Harvard and 29-year business prowess in a consultative session. Guess what? It's free. You can read George's reviews at georgedigianni.com and learn more about what differentiates him from every other lender you've ever met on our show. Our second sponsor, yes, I'm doing it right now, Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. I don't forget. I
forgot last week.
Is our go-to home inspector. We, of course, always give our clients a number of inspectors to choose from, but Martin is the inspector we prefer. He is always on time or early, finishes in a timely manner, gets the report to you the same day, and all reports are color-coded. Red for serious issues and blue for minor things to look at. You can always book him at bpginspections.com or reach him at 817-401-3240. And last but certainly not least, Greg Holberg is with Liberator Health Insurance. Your simple solution to affordable healthcare is here. Join the Liberator movement and take control of your healthcare. $5 million lifetime maximum per policy. Customize your healthcare plan to fit your healthcare and budget needs. Use any doctor or hospital without a penalty. For additional savings, use the PPO network at no additional charge. Teledoc is included in all plans. Save 40 to 60% on your premiums. The Liberator deal of the week, a young realtor for $190 per month, and that includes dental. Now offering a health savings account Visa debit card plan. Receive $2 of medical benefits for every $1 you contribute to your account, and that includes telemedicine calls at no additional cost. As an independent agency, Liberator is committed to transforming healthcare in Texas through innovative healthcare plans that are affordable and rich in benefits. For more information and to get a quick quote, call or text Greg Holdberg, independent health insurance broker, at 214-886-4688, or visit them at liberatorhealthinsurance.com.
Yeah, appreciate all the sponsors out there. They're great. I'll tell you what I like about the sponsors, from a personal level, because I appreciate it. I have a minimum of 20 to 30 people who approach me during the week asking for our business and all that type of stuff, because we do run what's considered to be one of the largest Keller Williams groups out there. So we get a lot of calls, people who want to do business with us, and it's always a one-way street. They want us to give them something, and they don't want to give anything in return. What I like about our sponsors is that they take the time to look at what it is that we do and try to help us. And I'm telling you, that's important. If you want our business, you should get to know what it is that we do. George is a great example. And George spent, probably a good few days to a week looking at what it is we do, researching what we do, because he was interested in it. And of course, Martin and Mr. Holberg all know that as well already. But those are the type of people we want to work with that actually look at what we do and are very savvy as to the business we're doing. So we appreciate those guys. Plus, it's good for them because they get Core Center in front of our own agents, not to mention a lot of the Keller Williams family that watches this as well. So we appreciate all those guys. All right, back into the appraisals, continuing to it. We set up the stage. Now let's start. We're going to have two phases in for the next 30 to 40 minutes. We're going to talk first of all about the comps and how the comps can affect the appraisal. All right, and that's going to be the heart of the show, because the heart of the appraisal is the comps. And then we're going to talk about when the comps don't match, what it is that we need to do. Probably the most important part of the show too. So, all right, let's talk about comps in general. Banu, start us off with what is when we comp a house, what is it that the generic values that we're looking at? Just a simplistic, what do we hope the best case scenario comp is?
Of course, it should be at least at the price we are listing at or higher. And I always look for homes that are in the same year built, square footage, and possibly in the same neighborhood. So for example, if I live in Stonehill Farms, I want to look at Stonehill Farms first, because most homes were built by same builder or similar characteristics, but sometimes I've gone up to 0.6 miles, up to even a mile if it's needed. But basically look for the home that has similar features: 2-story versus single story, media room or no media room, pool or no pool, and things like that. And it is a pretty challenging thing when you're in a listing agent shoes to be able to find good comps to even provide your seller as well as the appraiser actually.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great response. Um, that's a perfect general response. That is what in a perfect world, that's what we're looking at. We want houses to be within similar square feet. We want them to be hopefully in the same subdivision, because subdivisions are different depending on builder, depending on value. Even in the same subdivision, sometimes we can have issues. Like if you start getting to phase one, phase one can be very different, and usually is very different from phase six. So you even have to separate that, because remember, we're trying to find the house that most closely represents the one that we're looking at right now, to say, well, look, that one sold here and this one's the same thing. So we got to be pretty damn close. Mike, on the square footage, how far off do we want to be when we're looking at something square feet? A lot of the general public is really metrically not inclined when it comes to understanding how much is square feet. And I'm going to give an example of that in a minute. But when we look at a square foot, how far off do we want to be?
I usually start around, I'd like to get as close as possible, but I'll usually start around 200 below or over.
Yeah.
I'll go to 250, and if you have to go to 300 because the rooms, the number of rooms are the same and they both have pools, then I guess you can. But, I'd like to stay around 200, so if it's 1,500, I'll go 1,300 to 1,700.
Now, one thing I always appreciate for people that watch, and my guys already know it, is that their answers are always spot on to what they've been trained on. They know exactly what those numbers are. And when they're asked those questions, they rarely will give an answer that differs from what our core requirements are when we're looking at those. So that's right. I love the 250 because Mike's smart enough to know that every bit he's going over 200, he's starting to get a little bit outside whether this house is similar. I noticed that I like how he went from 200 to 250 versus 200 to 300, because he knows as he approaches 300, he's getting out of whack as to what that house is. So look, let me give you guys something, especially this is for the our clients that watch, or anybody in the general public. Let me give you a little bit of an understanding about square footage. When we go over 300 square feet, that's a significant change to the home. And if you can't picture what 300 square feet is, picture your kid's room that is probably a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12. You're talking about 100 to 120 square feet. Well, if we're talking about 200 or 300 square feet, we're talking about 2 to 3 more rooms, or maybe even an entire game room or media room. Right? So this is significant. You can't just say that my house, Mike sold his house yesterday and we're the same house. And then when we look up at it, Mike is 500 square feet different. That is not the same house.
It also worries about, like, if your house is 1,500, 200, 300 is a lot. If your house is 4,000, 300, not so much.
So look, that's why they're on the show too, because we don't script it. We do it live and then we go to podcasts with it. And that's something I don't have on the list today that really should be brought up, because this comes up quite a bit. We have people try to use the same system in place for their comps for a low dollar versus a high dollar, or a smaller versus a bigger. And you can't do it like that. The smaller homes have a much higher dollar per square foot versus a larger home. So if you're in a neighborhood that has a home that's 1,200 square feet and you've got a home that's 2,800, you can't use the dollar per square foot on the small one and apply it to the bigger one. That's going to make that bigger one astronomically higher than it's worth. That's why we have to stick within similar square feet. Like, we get that a lot too. We get the house over there sold at $250 a square foot. I'm like, it's 1,000 square feet smaller than yours. It's not even in the same hemisphere or universe.
And it's one story.
So why would you think that? So again, this show has a lot of value today, because not only does it teach the general public, it also tells the agents as to why they have to explain it to them like this, because these are the obstacles that we come across when we get out there. We will actually have people that say that to us. And we're like, how can you? That's not even close. There's a huge gap of education between us and the general public. It's huge. And that's why we're here, to make sure they understand it. So, Richa, when they go through and they start doing the formal type of CMAs. Have you ever seen anybody take the dollar per square foot and add them up and average them and say that's what the house should be? Do you think people out there do that?
Yes, people do that. But again, the price per square foot, like you mentioned, they vary. Is that my side, the disturbance?
There you go. You're good now.
Oh, okay.
It was you.
Was me. Apparently, I have a background vacuum noise, I guess.
Yeah, it's the Roomba.
Yes, people do that. But again, I think it goes back to the conversation you're talking about. Price per square foot, yes, it's a good measure if all the other metrics are in place. So if you're looking at the square footage of the house in place, updates are in place, type of neighborhood is in place, and the way the home is priced relatively, right? So if all of those are in place, then the next notch down of comparison can be price per square foot.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes with homeowners because everyone thinks their home is more special than everyone else's, right?
Right.
And so I feel like this theme comes up all the time. It's a lot of our job to manage expectations and tell them and help talk to them that, okay, yeah, I know you put in a Miele or like a Thermador, gas stove, but it's not any different than a KitchenAid gas stove.
Right.
In terms of price and value on the home. It's great that you use it. You pay the premium for using it, something really, really nice. But it's the same in terms of a value added to a home. If both homes are 5,000 square feet, both homes have the same finish, both homes have the same update. You're not going to get $10,000 more for your Thermador just because you spent $10,000 more.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, there might be some homes that expect it. If you have a $1 million home without a Thermador, then you might go wide, but if you have a 1,500 square foot home.
Yeah. And you just happen to be a fantastic chef. Kudos to you. I'm glad you enjoyed it and were able to provide that service for your family or your business. But that's not, again, if it's in a comparable home, maybe, but you can't compare the two. The same thing goes with the pools that Banu mentioned, right? Or media rooms. Just because you have outfitted your pool or your media room with all the bells and whistles to enjoy it, it's great that you've enjoyed that, but that doesn't necessarily translate into dollar for dollar equal values added to the home.
So let's talk about the pool, because the pool is one of the item agendas today. And for our listeners out there, it's especially the agents that are new to this is a hard one for grasp. Again, this isn't something you're taught in a book or a classroom. And this is something over time you have to have knowledge over, that you've seen it enough times, you understand how it works. So this is a very valuable show for you, because we're basically taking all of our experience and saying, hey, look, this is what you need to look at when you get to that point. Okay, so look, the pool. Generic pool these days, like just one that barely has cement, water, and none of the bells and whistles.
Water?
Yeah, water, no. The cheapest pool out there, you're probably looking at 35 to 40K.
Mm-hmm.
That's cheap. That's a cheap pool.
Most people won't even build those.
They don't do those anymore.
Yeah, most people won't even dig a hole anymore in concrete.
Yeah.
I mean, they want 60, 70K now.
Easy 60, 70K. And that's for a basic pool. That's not with the slide, and the stone and like the Pebble Tech finish. This is like a basic pool. The prices have gone up significantly.
Yeah,
and this is not just like COVID, lack of inventory situation. In general, building a basic pool costs you about 60 to 70K now.
You guys are right.
I was told 5 to 7,000 more every year.
Yeah, you're right. I probably need to adjust that total, because you're right. It's not that more.
Robert's talking about above ground, guys.
What's that?
Robert's talking about above ground.
Hey,
Robert, that's
probably for that.
Tell you that is not a pool.
Well, it's got a nice deck, though.
I love it. There's a lot of truth to that. So look, they are the basic ones. Now they're even telling you they're close to 50, 70.
But it's not adding. I will say though, but I haven't seen that translation in the dollar amount go up 60, 70K. The dollar amount in addition to the value of the home is still about 40, 50K.
All right. And that's the number I was going to give. So if you build the pool, so here's the myth. A lot of people always tell you, especially the general public, they're always like, I heard a pool is a waste of money. The old saying, the moment you start digging a hole, you're digging a hole for your money, whatever. That's not true. All right.
Not in
That's not
Texas.
true. There's absolutely value in the pool. Believe me. The key is how much is the value. All right. So the myth is that a pool is a waste of money. That's from someone who probably wanted to put a pool in and said that. That's not true. All right. It's not
Didn't
true at all.
maintain their pool and then have a lot of costs, and then
Right.
the ones that are complaining.
That's the other one comes up too. Oh, the pool's expensive. The pools that are built today are not that expensive. They run on salt generators. We don't have to do the mixtures anymore, the chlorine. It's very rare that we have to put much money into them. So that's not true either. So that's another fallacy today that why the pools are expensive. The pool does add value. Rich is right though. It's about 40 to 50. And then after that, if you put $150,000 pool in, I'm promising you're not getting 150. Now there is an exception to this, as there is with everything. When you start getting to the luxury high-end homes, like if you start getting to where you're over $1 million, and we're not talking about a regular pool. Now we're talking about like a Billy Madison pond with jet ski, wave runners and stuff like that. That type of pool might get the value depending on what's in it. Okay. But the run of the mill pools out there, when you start costing that 45, 50, you're probably not getting that back. And it's like Rich has said, you have to accept the fact that you did it for your own enjoyment. You didn't do it to add the value to the house. And that's a really good rule of thumb when it comes to putting a pool in.
It's like buying a brand new house, correct? Like you're paying for, in theory, less headache and less maintenance of a brand new home, but you pay a premium for that when you purchase a brand new house. It comes at a cost. So you enjoyed that when you paid. It's like driving your car off the lot. Yes, you bought a brand new car, but it's not worth it after you've driven it.
All right, so that's a perfect example too. A pool is like that. A pool is like once you put it in, the moment you put it in, the next day, it's probably not as worth as much. Like let's say you put a $65,000 pool and you have the bill, appraiser comes in, you're like, it's worth 65. They're like, no, it's not. Now, it's funny you said it that way, because this is a point that I have that's in difference with the appraisers. I agree that it's not worth what it was yesterday. I understand the concept of depreciation and the cars and all that type of stuff. But where I disagree is when the $65,000 pool was built 2 months ago and the appraiser comes in and says it's 35 or 40. I'm like, how the hell did you get that number? So this is the takeaway from the show. All right. The appraisers, and I've got a lot of friends who are appraisers, a lot of them. And I want to be very clear. This show comes off sometimes as it's bashing an appraiser. That's not true. I actually think most appraisers are pretty damn good at what they do. I'm talking about
ones that are about to do my
that
list.
are bad apples that make it right. What's that?
Said especially the appraisers that are about to appraise my listing. They're excellent. They're the best in the business.
Yeah.
Brent would like to wish a welcome to the appraisers that are going into this.
Can we get some sponsors?
Most
we don't have enough time for more sponsors.
Yeah, that's true.
There are a few people that are bad, that make it bad for the rest of the industry, and those are the ones that can be a problem for us. Now, if you ask any appraiser, even the good ones, they're going to tell you there is no rhyme or rhythm to how they assign value to the appraisal or to the pool. They're going to say it's a random number. That some of them will argue, well, it's the square feet. I'm like, no, I go that you're making up a number, and that's a concern. That's a concern because it really does create a variance between what we said it was versus what they do. And that's another takeaway from the show today. Probably the biggest takeaway: the appraisals are subjective. They're subjective, all right? Which means there's going to be differences of opinion. And we have differences of opinion, especially when one opinion causes a family not to get a home of their dreams, you got an issue. And that's why we're talking about how do we minimize this subjectivity between the appraiser and what we do. Some of the other common things that we see that are a problem in the appraisal process are the value given for hardwoods, granite countertops. Once again, these are items that probably cost a lot more than the appraiser is giving value for. Okay. And this causes us issues. All right, Brent, how did we used to, well, Banu already said it, but today, what's the difference in the way we used to comp a house versus today? What do we have to change our opinion of that we didn't used to factor in that's relevant today?
Well, I mean, multiple offers.
Multiple offers, but inside the house itself, what is it that the appraiser can now do that they used to not be able to?
You're talking about upgrades.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
All right. So does anybody remember? And it's okay if you don't. That's why I said everybody. I didn't put one person on this. Does anybody remember why that's changed in the last? It's probably been 5 years now. Does anybody know what the change was in that?
Dodd-Frank.
What's that?
Dodd-Frank.
That's right. So the Dodd-Frank Act.
It was Dodd-Frank, Robert.
It was Dallas is.
You don't ever remember anything, Robert.
After it has already been answered, which means he didn't know. So it's the Dodd-Frank Act, okay? And the Dodd-Frank Act is important when it comes to appraisals because it really changed the way we do the industry. The Dodd-Frank Act was originally created to counter the financial disaster that we had in 2008 with the meltdown of mortgages, where basically a lender could give money to a dog and they would give the money. As long as the dog didn't pick up the cash themselves, they would allow it. We obviously had a terrible meltdown, probably the worst downturn we've had ever, maybe hopefully ever. And it caused for complete reform from the national basis on how we provide loans. So just like typical government fashion, there's a problem. It needs to be fixed. But instead of fixing the problem, they go the polar opposite of it and make it a new problem by going the other way with it. So what they do is they become stringent, ridiculously stringent on the process. One of the things that came out, well, there's two things that affect us today in this conversation. One of the things that the Dodd-Frank Act said was that you could no longer have conversation directly with the appraisal because they felt that a lot of those appraisers were being coerced and influenced to give a certain value. Whereas that was true with a very small part of the population. Overall was not true. It was a complete joke. But now all of us suffer because a few idiots did it. And now we all have to suffer from it. Now, here's another thing that's a good takeaway from the show. Lots of takeaways from the show today. And we mentioned this last week as well. Remember, the appraiser works for the lender. They do not work for the buyer. They don't work for us. They work for the lender. But that rule I just mentioned applies to the lender too. The lender's really not allowed to have a lot of direct contact with that appraiser. And I find that weird when they're the ones that they're working for, right? Not because the appraiser wants to, or the lender wants to influence the appraiser, but more for they can't correct them when they do something wrong. They can't tell them, hey, that's not right what you put in there. And that presents problems for us in the financing world, the process of this, a part of this process. That causes us a problem because now we got someone who works for somebody else that if the other person does it wrong, they can't tell them it's doing wrong. And then we're affected by it. And we don't have any control over it. So that's one thing that happened. All right. Then the other piece, and it's the piece I've been talking about, they added what was called a collateral underwriting review. All right. This is really a good point for a lot of people that don't know real estate, that have sold houses 20 years ago versus today, or just don't know the knowledge. Believe it or not, prior to 5 years before the Frank Dodd Act ever even came into existence, when we comped a home, we did it just like Banu said. We did not factor your upgrades. We did not factor your hardwoods. In fact, a lot of people get annoyed when they would tell us, well, I just put all this in. I'm like, I really don't care. I mean, I didn't say that, but in my mind I am. Because I knew it didn't matter. So they were very frustrated by that. Frustrated to believe that, well, I just put 20,000 of hardwood down. Why is my house the same?
Because it's an automated risk assessment that they're doing.
Right.
It's not, this is not necessarily, again, this is why we were talking about pools and media rooms and, you know, how Michael said, how do you compare a home? Because these are all, a lot of these are automated, and the rest of it, I think, is sprinkled in with sometimes a little bit of subjective opinion.
Yeah.
And then that's where some of the issues end up happening. And that's why things like Dodd-Frank were initiated to help alleviate that, but it did make the problem a little more hairy.
So that's a good point to make, is that when Dodd-Frank initiated that, they basically now will allow the appraiser to give value to the upgrades. So now they do allow them to give value. Now, this was initially celebrated. When we first saw this, we were like, you know what, it's about time. Because it is ridiculous that we don't factor in someone who put $20,000 worth of hardwoods versus the person who didn't, right? Even if, like Rich said earlier, that when someone does that, they should be doing it for their own enjoyment, which hasn't changed. That's still a fact. it did change in the belief that some people needed to be given more value for others, and vice versa. Some people needed to be decreased in value because of what was on there. But here's the problem, all right? This is the biggest takeaway from the show today. Here's the problem that we run into. Real estate agents still are not trained to comp a house that way. They are still trained on what Banu said. They're still trained on doing it the traditional way. And if you ask why, because they're not trained in saying how much a granite piece of countertop is worth, or how much hardwood is worth, or how much a particular brick is worth, or what type of, they're not trained in that. And quite honestly, neither is the appraiser. All right. That's the funny part. They're not either. Actually, if you want the biggest hypocrisy of the appraisal industry, how can any one person be expected to say this is this and this is this and this costs this if they don't expertise or sell that type of product? That's the greatest hypocrisy in itself.
No, but there's some general guideline, right? Like you should understand that there's a big difference between a Formica countertop and a granite countertop and a quartz and a marble in terms of the type of product it is and general price range, right? But again, there is a big difference in countertops in stone and how it's installed and price. You can get a $5,000 slab marble countertop, but you can also get a $25,000, $30,000 a slab of countertop.
And I think that is why when I had any of my listing, or even when I am on the buyer's agent side, I request the listing agents to provide the updates information to the appraiser. So if you have the original invoice of the countertops, and so if you did end up putting a $20,000 countertop, it will be helpful for the appraiser to know that you did not, that it may impact the final appraisal price, because appraiser might think that's a pink elephant in that neighborhood, but it might still give them that information. And also this time for my previous listing, I took the effort to do some adjustments for the bathrooms, the media room and all that. And I think that truly helped me and my seller to get the appraisal at a better value.
All right. So Banu brought up another point that we have to discuss. We already said we cannot talk directly to the appraiser, right? We can't. But what we can do is provide data that we think is helpful to the way we comp that house, so they can at least look at it and see what we're looking at. If they want to defy us, that's one thing. But at least it's there. And most of the good ones out there, if they see that, they'll be like, that's very helpful. Now, what Banu's talking about is that
that's literally when people hire a real estate agent to be an advocate for you, not necessarily just, for the buyer or the seller or whatever on the other side, the opposing team or party. It's so I can provide you the most information, crucial, information to help you make your decisions. And appraisals are a big part of it.
So look, if you're taking notes, what she just said is a great way to distinguish yourself when you're talking to someone who asks, why do I need an agent? Well, I don't have enough time. There's about a million reasons, but I'll tell you a few. That's one of them that you spout off. Is this process here? The difference between a brand new agent versus a experienced one. The experienced one knows to do this. The brand new one, good luck. They're praying to God they even know what the appraisal is, more or less, that there were things that should have been pointed out. And as we discussed last week, the biggest sin here is that if you don't do that and the appraisal comes back bad, remember, appraisers do not like the fact that they give what they consider to be their educated value, and for someone else to go, oh, you missed this, this, and this, and for them to go, you're right, I'm incompetent, let me change it. They're not going to do that. Even if you are right, they're not going to do it. So you have to get on the front end, and the front end is making sure that there's data, usually on the kitchen counter, that's available. Now, what Banu was talking about, which is even higher than the regular experienced agent, she knows that not only is she going to do that for her own, but she knows when she has her buyer, she's going to tell the other agent, just in case they don't know, you need to make sure that you have this stuff down, because there's a good chance that house is going to have a tough time with appraisal. So we need to have this information out there.
I just had my seller put all their upgrades, everything they did. I put my comps, and then the appraiser didn't take it. So That's awesome.
Yep. Which gets us into our last section here, and the most important piece. We've been talking about all these issues for the last 2 shows now, how this happens, where it goes, why it happens. Now we're going to tell you what to do with it. You got about 4 or 5 choices. And what we're talking about now is when the appraisal fails, when the appraisal has not met value. If the appraisal has not met value, they're going to have to, withstanding.
value is the sales price.
That's right. Yeah, without standing the addendums that said I'll take it without the appraisal. Forget that. Let's just talk about generic. It has to make the appraisal for this deal to go through, and it didn't. Okay. In this particular case, option number one, the buyer can pay the difference. Let's say it's off by $10,000. The buyer can come up with an extra $10,000 to purchase the house.
In cash. That's
in cash. That's right.
For your down payment, guys. This is not going to be covered by the loan.
That's right. It has to be. Their
so
down payment's going up. Down payment's going up, right? That's one. And obviously a buyer doesn't like to be told that, right? Because that means now not only are they acknowledging that they're overpaying, they actually are starting to overpay from the beginning. All right. That's one. Second option is the latter. The seller can reduce down to the price.
Not going to happen now.
What's that, Mike?
Not going to happen now.
Not now. You notice how he said that? There's a time, and Mike's done this long enough too. There was a time that's absolutely what the seller would have done, like a snap of a finger.
When it's a buyer's market, it'll happen.
That's what's funny about the markets, how cyclical they are. But right now, he said it right. Now, forget it. That ain't happening.
You know, talking about the first one, where the buyer brings the cash, if it's a $225,000 house, you know, for a sale price and it appraises for $215,000. So they come to the table with $10,000 more. Well, now it's a $225,000 comp.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're
because it goes in the MLS as $225,000.
Yeah. So I mean, you're really just continuing
it doesn't matter that it only appraised for $215,000.
That's right. So you've already lost equity in the house itself by putting it in there like that. That's a good point to make too. I like that. I didn't know where you're going with that, but now I see, and that's a good point. All right. So those two options, right? You got the third, which is the most optimal in a regular market, which is not a regular market right now. By the way, option number one is the one that's going to happen right now. Okay. In a regular market, everybody decides to split. Buyer says, I'll come up with half. Seller comes down half. That's the right thing to do. And yes, that is the most fair thing to do in these types of situations. Okay. It's not going to happen right now.
Most homeowners and buyers do that.
Right.
Because most are decent.
Understand that, okay, extending, it makes sense for both parties to do this because you're hoping so many days into this that it doesn't make sense necessarily to go back and start this process over, go back to showings, go back to this, that, and the other, right? It's in everyone's best interest to come to even terms and then move forward.
And both wants are being satisfied. The buyer wants the house and the buyer wants to sell.
Yes.
So you're right. They want this to happen. All right. Then you get to the not so pleasant parts. Option number 4. Protest the appraisal. Say it's wrong, which means you have to go back to the lender, and the lender goes back to the appraiser and says, you suck.
How many of you that actually worked for?
Very little. It's less than it's happened a couple times in different markets. Right now,
I've just had one time where they changed the value, but that's it.
Yeah.
How off were they? And then, what was the recovering value?
So it was a investment home that was priced at 183 or something, and the appraisal came down at 160, but they made it up to almost like 180 or something.
Yeah, we're usually talking about a $20,000 difference. If it's any more than that, all this is out the window. Which gets us to our last comment: is that the whole thing falls apart. Right.
Well, before you get to that, there is another option. It happened to me last year. I had a house that missed appraisal by $40,000. Of course, we did what is it called? The reconsideration. The appraiser said no. So my seller paid for another appraisal, and it made appraisal. It made value. Yeah. So
now the only thing you have to be careful. I'm not so sure you can do that in the FHA or the VA. I think the FHA or the VA stand the way it is, but on a conventional, that can be done. All right. So that is a good point to make. That we should discuss that is a possibility.
But that generally is in somebody's best interest, like you said, if it's down $40K. Most agents are not trying to overprice a house by $40,000, honestly.
Yeah.
So if it's by that much, that's a legitimate reason to ask for a reconsideration.
Correct.
So
$5,000, not so much.
You bring a great point that's going to close this show out, and I've preached it for years, and this is the problem with having a bureaucratic system to fix such an issue. So most people know my background is financing, high level financing, and You know, and when you're in that type of industry, it is very common that the numbers are not always going to be exactly correct. In fact, most corporations are going to use a plug of a variance of 5%, knowing that the numbers are off about that amount one way or the other. Okay. I am telling you, I was going to say I would be willing to bet, but I know for a fact that at least 90, if not more, percent of the homes that have never made appraisal over the last 10 years, almost all those were a $10,000 to $20,000 difference. No more than 20,000. Most of them are 5 to 10,000 off.
Mm.
The whole point of the appraisal is to make sure that the property is worth the amount, so there's not fraud being done for the bank to pick up the loan. I don't think anybody argues that a house that misses an appraisal by 4,000 or 5,000, that fraud's being committed. That's pretty damn close to what they agreed on. And what I've preached for years is that there should be a 5% variance ratio on those appraisals, that if those things come off and they're within 5%, that appraisal should go through. I don't know why it's not installed. I don't know why it's not done. It's the most common sense thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And it still supports every reason why an appraiser goes out there. I do not understand how that has not become part of the system. Although I take it back. Maybe I do. Maybe it's because you don't have many finance people who become real estate people that practice the operation side, that are indulged inside the contract and know the appraisal side. That's a unique combination. And maybe that's why. Because remember, these are federal laws that are passed. You got somebody up there that doesn't know a damn thing about any of these things that said that's what's going to go into this. And that's part of the problem. Yeah, Richard.
There's one more thing we didn't discuss, that if it appraises over the sales price, so the example Michael gave of 225, say the appraisal comes in at 230. As a buyer's agent and as a buyer, you are not required to disclose that to the seller. You just let them know, yes, it made appraisal. Now, that doesn't mean you're bringing in any more or less. That doesn't change any of the terms that you guys agreed on in terms of the sales of the house, the price of the house, all of that. That does happen
we don't know
rarely.
a damn thing. We don't have to tell them anything. That appraiser, the buyer's appraiser.
You don't have to tell them what it appraised at any point.
Which I will tell you, that's actually, she is right. We did miss something on that. That's a good takeaway from the show as well. It does you no good to tell somebody that the house made over the value, how far it went. Because here's the problem with that. One, if someone felt they were jilted and that they sold for a lot less and the appraisal comes back high, they immediately say, I told you I was screwed. The other side of this is, and a lot of people don't know this, most appraisers these days, once it hits value, they don't try much harder to make it go any further.
But that's private information for the buyer. That has to do with the buyer and his loan and his finances. That has nothing to do with the seller's personal information.
That's the problem is it's inaccurate. It's not for sure. It's not given. So why do we go through and ask that data when it doesn't matter? The key is, did it go through or did it not? That's the key to us. Is it going to make
exactly?
So there really should never be value conversations about how much. It doesn't matter. If it made it, it made it. And that should be the generic response. I can tell you, I never tell anybody the value. I'm like, that has nothing to do with this. The only reason you're asking that question is for bitterness. The only thing that comes from that is bitterness. So why are we going to answer that question? So that's a great point. We don't have to tell the value. We're probably not going to tell the value as it is. All right. That show, not only is it good for a new agent, very good for your client. Your clients that struggle with this process, they don't understand it, good one to forward to. This is one of my favorites from an instructional standpoint, because so few people understand how this is. And it does happen to be the most difficult thing that we encounter, are comps and appraisals. 21 years now. And I still have to struggle sometimes when I do these things. You are never an expert at that comp. There's always something that can be thrown for a loop. So believe me, as a new person, very difficult. Always get your team lead, your managers, or your mentors, or whoever to help you with that process. Quite honestly, for the first couple of years, you're never going to be able to do it on your own. I promise you, no matter how good you are, I'd love to have anybody tell me that they hit the comp on the mark. I'm almost willing to bet, like money, decent money, although you have to accept the bet if you do it, that you're going to miss something on that comp if you started off, if you've done it for the first couple of years. So always get help. You're going to need it. Y'all want to thank everybody. Thanks for all my. I love the fact we had so many people on the show today. I love our agents. That made me feel we need to do that more often. I love seeing everybody. I love them guiding the show. I don't have to talk as much on the show, which everybody's thrilled by. Plus, their expertise, they're in it day to day. They're the ones that are digging in this hole. I just see it and do it from the management side of it and know what they're going through. But they're seeing it day to day. So I just love having them on. They're experts in the industry. Of course, I'm biased because they're business partners of mine, but they're great people and great agents. So I think it's great that they're on the show sharing with their clients and other agents as well. Thank y'all for watching. Always watch the archives, push the archives. We always appreciate the views. Thank y'all for the sponsors. Fantastic. We always appreciate your work. We will see you guys next Thursday. Have a great week.